Welcome to the Draknek and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne, the producer at Draknek and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Draknek at Draknek and Friends.
Hey.
Today, we're joined by Ben Wilson, who you may know from working at Draknek and Friends. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Do you want to introduce yourself to listeners, people who don't know you, just chatting about who you are?
Yeah, I'm Ben Wilson, he, him. I am a relatively new addition to the team at Draknek and Friends. Prior to that, I worked at Die Gute Fabrik on Salty Chronicles. Prior to even that, I was working in AAA at Sumo Digital in the UK. And then prior to even that, I was a solo indie making games in my bedroom. So weird indie turned AAA turned indie again career I've had.
What got you into game dev the first time?
Great question. I think being bored and unfulfilled in a previous like pre-games industry job that I had, and I just picked up game development sort of as a hobby and did that for a few years, and then just started putting my games online. Alan, I think you literally played either the first or second thing that I'd ever made.
Gosh.
It was the first time we met, and it was completely by happenstance. It was at Nottingham Game City, and you were showing A Good Snowman, and I was like vaguely aware of you because of Sokobond, and I think I had just been working on this thing for like 3 months or so in what was then a very like nascent Unreal Engine 4, which I was learning, and that was the first like public showing of a game that I'd had, and I was really nervous.
That's great. I do not remember this game, but please tell us about the game that you made.
We don't need to talk about.
Yes. Let's.
Yeah, sure. Well, what's interesting is I also remember your comment about it. It was a local multiplayer game, sort of in the vein of Sports Friends or Towerfall or that sort of thing, like single screen local multiplayer game. And it was sort of about like it was like a Bomberman style top down thing, but it had a weird sort of shared input system where each player moved independently, but whenever a player pressed fire, everybody fired.
This rings a slight bell, yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't sort of at the booth sort of area when you played it, but at some point you had played it, and then we chatted at some point during that weekend of Game City, and you were like, yeah, it's fun. You said something to the effect of like, if I was working on this, I would like probably put it down. You'd be like, oh yeah, that's a fun little like proof of concept. Nice. And I did do that, I guess. I didn't really get that much further with it because it was more sort of, I was learning how to make games, and learning to make games and finishing games are two very different sort of propositions. So yeah, I was very much in the period of like, oh, I've got an idea in my brain, better just build it and see what it turns into. So it's sort of a fun first meeting, which was, I'm going to say that was like early 2015 or 2014. So 10 years ago now.
Yeah, been a while.
Mm-hmm. Sure has.
And yeah, what was the transition like from making games in this very like you can just make stuff for yourself and like you can kind of do whatever, like the very different mindset to having a job in the games industry?
Yeah, it was very much the source of a lot of imposter syndrome in the first like year and a half or so, because I went from doing that sort of thing. I'd made a lot of games by the time I worked in a studio and sort of gone to more sort of events and done game jams and that sort of stuff. and I was sort of confident in sort of the style of games that I was making, but doing the games thing for real as opposed to just making them for myself was a lot of pressure. I think I was the only person at that studio at the time who was not sort of formally, either some sort of, veteran in games industry or had formal education in game design or whatever. But I was in the game design team at Sumo Digital for about 4 years, and I'm pretty thankful that they sort of took the chance on hiring this weirdo who had just sort of made games in his bedroom for 3 years. But that was really a cool experience in that a studio like that is always being thrown wildly different stuff. So year to year, you're working on, or getting little glimpses of at the very least, really different kinds of projects. I know that, like, for a lot of people, the AAA experience is like, oh, you sort of go into a room where you make like sports games or shooter games or whatever kind of game just forever for infinity until you leave, or whatever. But yeah, it was pretty. I mean, I got to work on Sonic the Hedgehog kart racing game. I got to work on a pitch for a horror game. I got to work on a Little Big Planet game, and a bunch of different things. I think I did a thing for Fortnite that didn't go anywhere in the end, but was fun to, I don't know, do.
Oh, weird. Everyone in the industry has touched Fortnite somehow?
Yeah, crazy.
Not me.
I was going to say, Alan, you are the only person on this call that has not touched Fortnite in a work capacity. Yet.
I haven't even played it.
Me neither.
Hey, I don't... this is going to be a controversial topic, but sure is a well-made video game.
Yeah.
That is spicy.
It sure does have some good fundamentals.
A lot of things are well made. I think casinos are well made,
Wow.
Look, I'm not saying that the business practices of Fortnite are ethical. I am saying that, like, I don't know, the moving and shooting is fun.
I agree.
Is it true that they disabled the shooting part while there were Star Wars characters in it?
No, they disabled the ability to shoot at certain Star Wars characters.
Sure.
Wow.
Just like they disabled the ability to shoot at celebrities giving concerts.
Yeah, they implemented plot armor. That's fascinating.
I do not play Fortnite, but I have a respect for the software.
Sure. I don't have so much of a respect for the sort of business practices / cultural singularity that it has created.
And some of the labor practices.
Sure, absolutely.
But like, yeah, I don't know. Fortnite bad doesn't resonate with me so much as Fortnite gross.
This has been this week's Fortnite You do this every week, right?
Every week we talk.
Every week
you sort of weigh in on your current feelings about Fortnite.
We talk about Fortnite. We talk about the new skins that dropped.
Right.
Right. Hang on. Let me search newest Fortnite skins. This will be.
Can
timeless.
we all hold on before you reveal this? Can we all make a guess as to what sort of cultural touchstone / character has made it into Fortnite this week?
Yes, go for it.
I'm going to say Baby Shark.
I'm sure that's already been in there. I'm certain of it.
Winnie the Pooh?
Right.
That's out of copyright.
Yeah.
No. It seems like this week it's the Fantastic Four and Deadmau5.
That makes... Okay.
Sure, that tracks.
Deadmau5, less of a sort of current... Okay. Both of those make sense in their own way.
Yeah, Ben Grimm, The Thing, holding a gun. Normal stuff. Anyways, back to Sumo.
Right. Sorry about that. I'm probably going to do that a few more times. Just,
I don't know. Love a good digression.
No, I didn't mean digressions. I meant specifically digressions about Fortnite. Yeah. So I was there for a few years. And the last thing I worked on now was the game that ended up being called Hogwarts Legacy. I worked on it before it had a name, and it was a very complicated, weird thing that I probably don't have. This is probably not the place for talking about the weird stories about that project and also the weird subtext of working on that game while the figurehead of that property was at that time in 2019 beginning to sort of come off the rails publicly. So that was a fun conflicting thing to work on and then eventually leave. And then I went from there to working at Die Gute Fabrik, which was my first time working indie not on my own or with like a couple of friends. It was the first time sort of doing the studio thing.
And what was that transition like for you to go from such a like Sumo, like you said, it's not necessarily a traditional AAA, but it is very much a AAA, to going to a much, much, much smaller studio?
The main difference is that it was sort of unlearning this thing or readjusting to. So when I joined Sumo, I was going from being a person who just did everything. So I had like understanding of like, oh, this is, how you would implement a thing that you've designed, or this is how it would affect like art or whatever, or sound, or so I just sort of had that experience of like, oh, because I'm the guy who just would implement everything. But I had to sort of learn to like not stick my nose into other departments, because you have this like departmental sort of organization structure, and you're in one department right at a time. But then leaving there and going into indie again, it was sort of unlearning that and sort of putting on a bunch of different hats again. And sort of in a really loose sort of way, we had departments, but it was not as like hierarchical or sort of, it was much more permeable. And I think I enjoyed that. And I enjoyed like when there's between half a dozen and a dozen people there, like any given person's contribution sort of goes a lot further. There's a lot less sort of levels something has to go up before just making it into the game, or being a part of studio culture if you're introducing like a process or something like that. And so it suited me pretty well. It was a pretty good change, especially after like being in AAA just long enough to sort of start to tire of that whole deal. It was a well-timed change. And we worked on Salt Sea Chronicles, and that was for the most part like really fun to work on. Like we didn't crunch on that game, which is crazy in this industry. We didn't. I don't know. I think I really appreciate from that studio is sort of there was an outlook of putting the people who make the games before the game, which was really refreshing. Like one of the, our early milestones, we had this sort of, we got into a call and had this talk about like, hey, like nobody needs to like kill themselves to make this video game. We're doing video games here, just to put it all in context. Like it shouldn't be a sacrifice in the way that it often is. So I really appreciate that. And I think that sort of changed something about my understanding of like, how I like to work in games. And so, I think that's sort of fed into some of the transition from there to Draknek and Friends, is that sort of outlook of like sustainable working and sort of putting the people who make the product before the product. Not to turn this into like an advert or like PR piece for the studio, but something I appreciate.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about Salt Sea Chronicles and like the process there, other than the sort of people first production of it all.
So for people who aren't aware of it, it's sort of a story-based story first sort of adventure game. Has a lot of writing in it, and so the thing that was really different about that project was that the whole sort of pipeline was sort of engineered around this sort of writer first workflow where we were able to have this structure where we could sort of invite writers in to sort of this writer's room situation, and they didn't have to touch Unity, which was the engine we were using at the time. They were trained in like sort of this like relatively friction-free formatting of ink that we'd sort of put together, and that was their sort of interfacing with the game. It's like, okay, we've got these sort of script files, and in them they have cues for when things should happen, or and then the game was put together in a way where they were able to sort of get feedback on that before even like level art was there, and so you could sort of really quickly do revisions over revisions, and that was cool. Like sort of figuring out like, because usually like I don't know, you don't really get the opportunity to do rewrites in that way or have like revisions in that way, but it was something that was really important for that game, and so we made it sort of work. Outside of that, I helped make a card game, which was really fun. We did like a sort of card game mini game, which showed up in that game, and I got really into it. Me and Douglas Wilson, who you may know from the Goethe Fabrik, but also Johann Sebastian Joust. And the card game was cool because it was sort of fictionally situated within the world of the game. We thought, what if we make a mini game that is the card game that people in this world would play? And so it sort of, the rules of the game sort of reflected the sort of culture and politics of the world. That's a very like pretentious sounding, like high-minded like concept, but and because it's a game where you're like traveling between different islands, we thought like, okay, what if there's like house rules on different islands where you have little rule twists and variations, or and that sort of thing. And we had a lot of fun thinking about how to embed that sort of thing within game rules, but also keep it simple enough that like it's just a game that you can play with a standard like playing card deck. So that was a really fun process. It was nice to like, I was mainly at Die Goethe Fabrik doing sort of producery bits, a little bit of design, a little bit of sort of studio management stuff, but the card game was where I got to sort of just flex design chops for a little sliver of the project, and that was really cool. And it got me really into card games for a bit, really into trick-taking games. Really cool.
Yeah, with Spoils, that card game, I'm curious how much of the development of that was spent on the core rules and how much of it was spent on the variations of it.
Well, the core rules had to come. The core rules took a lot of prototyping because it needed to be something that sort of felt like it had like a, oh yeah, there's like an allegory in this, but also it needs to be lightweight enough to have other stuff stacked on top of it when we do the variants. And so I think there was a lot of stuff that worked as a game, but, you know, wouldn't have suited variants really well, or were just sort of a little bit too heavy for like, we had to bear in mind that this is like a mini game, and sort of the onboarding of that, something like that, has to be a lot lighter than if you were presenting it as the main thing. So it's a lot of considerations, but it took a few months to like sort of, and this was like a lot of, you know, analog prototyping. We used a tool, an online tool called playingcards.io, which is just a sort of virtual playing card table, which is really all you need if you're prototyping a card game. And then from that, it was one of those design ideas where like once it falls into place, other things just become obvious. And so designing the rest felt like a lot less of a undertaking. I don't know. It was a fertile enough idea that just the rest of it just sort of,
yeah. So you mostly tried to design the core idea and like get that in a place where it felt like solid and like there was space for building on top of it.
Sure.
And then did the variants after that core game was locked in.
Partly because like, you know, when we started, we had this vague impression of like, oh, what some of the chapters were going to be in the game, like what the story was going to be, but we didn't really like have nailed down like, okay, these are all of the areas you go to, and these are the areas that need card games attached. So like, you know, we really couldn't have done the variants first because we really wanted to sort of match them to the places. And so we there was a lot on the cutting room floor that was fun, but just didn't suit a place or didn't suit it. Just didn't have anywhere to go in the game, and so we were just like, oh, just leave it. But that's just it's designing for card games. I think there's a lot of ideas which are fine you could work with, but it's about finding the purpose.
Yeah. And was it always a card game? Was it always a trick taking game?
Yeah, that was sort of that was like the only thing that had been decided by the time that I joined the studio. I sort of had a first call with Douglas about it, and he was like, oh, the thing I really want to do for this game is a card game. I've gotten really into trick-taking card games, and I just think that's like a really
heck yeah
sort of fertile format for expressing sort of stuff within it. So, and yeah, it's true. I mean, it's like one of the oldest sort of genres of game, like when you think about like the history of games outside of video games, right? So it's got a lot of history attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, what, like a formalized physical game kind of starts with Mancala, and then you probably get cards only a couple centuries later.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, like within card games specifically, the trick.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I should define that. It's this sort of format where there's 4 players around the table or however many, and the loop of the game is each player plays one card into the center of the table, and then some resolution happens, and then somebody wins the trick or loses the trick depending on the situation, and then you go again, and you keep going until everybody's run out of cards, and that's like the format of trick-taking games. And like it feels like so many directions within that framework have been taken over the course of history, because it's such a it's such an old format.
So yeah, like that was something that was like creatively rewarding as like a small part of your job there. But I'm actually also curious from the other perspective, like the production side. Like I guess I'm looking at this mini game and I'm applying it to my own like way of making games, and it would be the kind of thing like I don't think I would even propose having like a mini game in any of our games, because I'd look at it and go like, well, that's not essential. And sure, in a world where we had like infinite resources, it would be great to put a bunch of them into something like that. But it seems like very risky to put a bunch of time and care into something that's like not the main thing. And it's like from a production process, like how was that thing supported within the company? How did you justify its existence? How did you avoid having to go like, oh, this is like nice, but it doesn't make sense to keep going with it?
Basically, the case for it was that like it's situated within a game where there is a lot of reading. Salty Chronicles is a game with lots of text, and that's sort of the primary thing you're doing in that game, is making decisions and navigating, but also doing a lot of reading. And so it felt like it would be good to have a palate cleanser activity in there, just from the point of view of like, okay, it's been 35 minutes or however long, and now we're giving the player an opportunity to just do something else, or just think about, or like even just to like let a bit of a story beat sink in while they do some other activity. And it sort of helps to create an experience where you're not just sort of doing too much of one thing for too long, or at least like the card game was like always optional, and so if you wanted to just steam ahead with the story, you could totally just do that. But I think it worked in that it was sort of a bit of a pit stop. And we also, I mean, that game was one where we sort of also tried to encourage people to just step away from the game. We put it into chapters deliberately because like we wanted to provide like easy off ramps to just going and stepping away and then coming back tomorrow or something like that. And maybe some people played it like that, but that's generally not, I don't know, just as an audience, people are not really used to like, it's a bit of a binge medium, isn't it? So it was sort of another way of like providing that. And like I said, like it was another way of like delivering the themes of the story that was going on, sort of without being explicit about another avenue of sort of steeping you in the world building and that sort of thing. So there were a couple of cases for going off and fighting around with card games for months. Also, while I'm on the topic of the card game, I do want to also shout out. I mentioned Doug because he was sort of the first person I was working on it with, but also later on in that process, we were joined by Daria Radu, who helped program and implement a bunch of. She put together this cool, crazy machine learning system for the computer controlled players that was really cool to see. And Alexandra Labusova, who wasn't with us for long, but also helped out. Just wanted to mention those names before I forgot.
Yeah, speaking of the multiplayer implementation, do you think designing a multiplayer game for a single player game was any different to just designing a multiplayer game?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think like some of what we had to do is inject a sense of like sitting at a table with people that you would have gotten if it was like an actual like, real human people playing a game together. And so we had, a system of like dialogue barks that were contextual based on what was happening in the game or whatever that, just sort of felt like people were talking to you while you were playing and responding to your moves, and in a way that like you would just get for free if you made a online multiplayer game or just sat around a real table with friends. But it's something that like felt strangely eerily absent as we before we had that, so we had to put it in.
Ben, when are you and I gonna sit down and play card games?
Great question. Anytime you like, Syrenne. Yeah. I know that we were talking about a different kind of card game, albeit card games, earlier this week. And I really want to hear about we don't have to put this on the cast because
yes. No, there's
reasons.
You've
got ideas.
Yes, I also am big into card games.
Yeah.
All right, but pivoting away from card games, even though that's a hard thing for my soul to do, talk to me about your enthusiasm for crossword puzzles.
Oh boy, yeah. How long have you got?
About 30 minutes.
Perfect. Because that's exactly how long I can talk about crossword. But no. I got into crosswords, and by crosswords I mean constructing crosswords last year, like around this time last year. And making crosswords is fun, folks. If neither of you have tried it, or if you're listening to this and you haven't tried it, and it sounds like a thing that you might be remotely interested in, please try. It is something that I can imagine would really appeal to people who generally like puzzles, because the construction of a grid, particularly where you have like a theme involved and have these sort of requirements for what you want to do with the grid, but also have to make it work as a valid sort of thing where all the words are sort of make sense for what you want to do with that puzzle. It's a real it's a bit of a brain teaser in ways that I sometimes hate when I'm like up in the late hours of the night just trying to get a grid finished so that I can submit it. But when I'm not under a time pressure, it is a lot of fun sort of prodding away at the problem and approaching it from different angles of like, oh, how can I fit these 5 elements in here into this 11 by 11 square space? But yeah, I got into crossword construction when I had this period of being a little bit ill. Like I had vertigo for a few months, and it sort of put me out of like going outside and sort of doing the regular sort of things that I was doing. And so I just sort of had a lot of time to fill, and I picked up crosswording just sort of on a whim because there's like free software out there you can just use that is really good for like maintaining word lists and like designing grids on. It's a whole rabbit hole, like as like a formal puzzle format, but also within that like there's ways to subvert that, given that like it's a thing that everybody has some passing awareness of, right? Everybody has like solved a crossword grid in their time. there's a lot of cool sort of ways that you can surprise a solver based on sort of what they expect a crossword to be. Whether that's in like the content, like I like to make my crosswords usually like about things that I care about, and so that like just in terms of like cultural touchstones and sort of queer references, and like in a way that you don't see if you open up the newspaper and do that crossword. So it can be surprising in that sense in content, but also in terms of like format. Like they can have like weird twists, like mechanical twists that can be a lot of fun to like discover as a solver, but then also design. So it's a good. I've been doing it off and on for about a year. I've had to take a little bit of I haven't taken a break, but I've slowed down a little bit in the last few months. But it's I recommend it.
Awesome. And where can people find some of your crosswords?
You can find my crosswords at 051.net or at AVCX, which is a crossword puzzle sort of distributor, and also on Puzzmo.com.
So, what's it been like working at Draknek and Friends?
Do you want the short answer or the long answer?
Either one.
I'm kidding. I'm bluffing. There's only one answer. It's been cool. I have not been. How long has it been? Like 2.5 months or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, like 10 weeks. So it's not been super long. I feel like I have been there for longer because the first like 3 weeks were crazy. Like, not in terms of like, oh my gosh, it's on fire, but like we had Spooky Express announcement on my first week, and then on my second week, was it I get them mixed up now, but one of them was the demo, and the other one was Cerebral Puzzle Showcase starting. I forget now which. Oh, it would have been the demo first, right?
Yeah, the demo was a couple of weeks after announcing Spooky. I want to say though that there was something in between announcing Spooky
There was something
and
in
releasing
between.
the demo. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, there was something every week for like 4 weeks, and I forget what the second thing was now.
Was it like announcing like a submission thing for Cerebral?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Or was it?
There was definitely something.
Yeah.
Or was it Monster? No.
I don't think so. Suffice to say, it was a very actually like fortunate sort of time to sort of just be a fly on the wall and like sort of figure out what is happening. Like, because it was a space of time where a lot of different things were being talked about, and I was getting up to speed in sort of like I don't know. It was cool. It was like usually when you join a new studio, you're sort of like
kicking your heels for a bit. You don't really like understand the sort of flow of how people work together, and what everybody is doing there and whatnot. But it was straight into it. It was like, oh, okay, right, okay, cool. This is what we're doing here. And then like even after that sort of flurry of that 4 week period at the beginning, like now we're getting into some other stuff with the. Can we talk about the new voices that we're doing the planning for that now? I think by the time this podcast comes out, that will either be just announced or it will be close enough to announce that we can tease on this podcast.
Right. Okay. Well, we've been planning that, and that's been a cool experience as well. And so like never a dull moment is the short answer. I would say it's I feel like I've gotten to the real surprising thing is just that how such a small studio does so many things in different places. Like it's sort of wild. It's not just developing a game or publishing games, it's also doing events and grants and all of that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah, I haven't had the problem of showing up and not knowing where I fit in, because there's always something to be working on, and been a good start.
Great. You want to say anything about Spooky Express to get people particularly excited about it?
Wait, what can I say that is?
I mean, I guess
safe?
like the question is more like, is there anything about Spooky that you're personally excited about?
I think Spooky Express is charming in a way that, I mean, several of the previous games have been charming in their own way, but I think like Spooky Express has like I don't know, it has a real like potential for. But the first time I played it when I joined, I was just sort of like enjoying the characters, even though they weren't necessarily like doing anything, and I didn't understand the mechanics yet at that point. And like, I just think, yeah, it's got such like a sense of like setting that it's really fun, and I think it's like really approachable in that way. And I think it's the sort of game that you could play with somebody because it is like it is at such a scale that you could sort of. It's not too finicky to sort of share a screen with somebody and sort of talk about, how to solve it together. And I do like when you can sort of cooperate on a puzzle like that. And yeah, I think it's just, I don't know if that was an intent at any point, but like it is sort of framed in such a way that it's like, seems to welcome that sort of play or that sort of like, reading of it.
Yeah, that's never been an intentional thing with any of our games, but I have really enjoyed the occasions when I've seen people play it cooperatively. Yeah, like particularly at events where there'll be a queue, but then the queue becomes just a group of people huddling over the computer. Is like a lot of fun.
I really enjoy playing games with my partner, and I also really enjoy puzzle games, but often those two things don't match up into a situation where I'm trying to think of an example of the last sort of. Because I played Blueprints recently, and I sort of tried to get them into. It's just not. There are too many moving parts, and it sort of takes sort of. I don't know. It's too difficult to. It's like starting The Sopranos or something. Like it's like committing to watching a long TV show together. That game, if you're playing it together. Whereas I think a game with like levels that like are pretty small and sort of have like a concept that they're about, or two concepts that you're putting together, it feels like something you can sort of tag team a lot easier.
Do you have any questions for us before we wrap up?
Yeah, you were asked when we spoke earlier this week. You said that I could ask a question, and I was thinking about this question this afternoon. And I guess the thing that I sort of came to was knowing that like both of you in your sort of respectively have been like working in games, involved with games for a long time now, and I wondered, like, I haven't been working in games for as long as either of you two, and my relationship to games and making games and my priorities and my sort of like what I get out of it has definitely changed over that time. And I was wondering what has been the thing that has sort of changed for you and stayed the same for you about the sort of practice of making games.
Alan?
Yeah, good question. I feel like even though the games themselves I'm making, like there's a very, very clear through line, I feel like the way I make games is like so different. And like partly that's because of what you were saying about like we're just doing so many different things. And that's just a mindset that is very different to when I was just like poodling around and like just making games for fun and like didn't really like hopefully people would play it and enjoy it, but like it wasn't a whole thing. It was just like a thing. And now, like, because of the successes we've had, we have this opportunity to do these impactful things that aren't making games, and it feels like really valuable to do that stuff. But also, like, Monsters Expedition just really did shift that. Like, before starting Monster Expedition, it was basically games was a full-time hobby for me. Like, I didn't have a day job while I was making the games before that, but I was approaching them very much as like, oh, this is just a thing I'm doing and I'm burning through savings and eventually I'll run out of money. And after Monster Expedition, I was in the position of, okay, I guess I'm like running a company now.
Yeah.
And like that happened, like that transition happened during the development of Monster Expedition. And then for a while it was like, oh, I'm running a publishing company for a while. Like we weren't even making games for a while. And so now we've got like an even further development of like, okay, well now we want to do publishing and development at the same time, and that's easy, right?
Huh.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It feels like a sort of allegory for growing up, you know, how like sometimes you just forget that you used to be like a kid who had zero like obligations or like sort of, oh gosh, now I like pay taxes and like go to what, like what's the deal with, like, you know, it just feels like the realization that like, oh wait, this used to be way simpler and now it's a whole thing and there are people involved and livelihoods and yeah.
God, yeah.
How about you, Syrenne?
I mean, my journey's been, documented. If people did not listen to episode 0 of this podcast, which was a episode about me and my journey in games, if you want to know more of the short version of this, go listen to that. But the sort of TLDR of like what changed for me is I think I just got better at identifying the parts that what am I good at and what brings me a lot of joy, and really trying to isolate my role, because like I didn't get into games to be a producer. I started into games writing about games, and then I started making games, and then I was testing games, and then I was release managing games, and then I was producing games, and it was like all through this it was like a lot of narrowing down, like, okay, these are the clear skill sets that I can provide that overlap greatly with what other indie developers, etc., need. Like, what are the pain points that almost all of these developers experience? Well, what a coincidence that overlaps very, very easily with the kind of stuff that I'm good at. Okay, I guess I should, like, if I want to keep eating, and having a roof over my head, I should probably find a way to monetize my strengths. And sort of just as a freelancer, identifying that, continuing to chase it and move in that direction. And like that transition took a couple years, but then, I pretty much got to where I'm at. So that's sort of the short version, where for me it was just a lot of increasing hyper specialization.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Is there anything else we want to touch on? We are basically at the hour mark.
Yeah, this is the point where you just sort of edit in the entirety of episode 0 into the back of the...
Oh god, yeah, Melanie, please don't do that.
You do the the flashback sound effect, the and then you just...
Yes.
Yeah.
Now what we should do is have a future episode, which is the
clip show.
Clip show.
Clip show, yeah.
Edit the through line for the whole podcast series.
Yeah.
It's just every developer asking, how do you make a game sell well?
Yeah. Syrenne and Alan are stuck in an elevator and...
Oh no!
Hey, Syrenne, you remember that time?
Yeah. Remember that time that we had on...
Right, exactly.
That's not how I remember it.
Yeah.
Goodness. 90 sitcoms.
Yeah,
All right.
Put it in the ideas bag.
Yeah, sure. Right behind the list of 300 people we want to have on the podcast first.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ben. It's been a pleasure to get to record with you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's also been a pleasure to get to work with you.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. Likewise, for both of you. And yeah,
I mean, you are obligated to say that, but I will take it at face value.
You can take it at face value. You can take it at non-face value. It's your compliment. Yeah, and thanks for having me on. I was a little bit intimidated at sort of, oh, you're having me on after you've had all of these like amazing puzzle people, which I don't really like. I mean, I make crosswords, but I don't really like put myself in that same sort of bag. And so I was like, what are we going to talk about? Should I prepare? Should I like bring things? But it's been lovely.
Yes. Turns out that usually once, as long as there's like strong chemistry, it's pretty easy to fill an hour.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again. Thank you, Alan, as always. And thank you for listening to the Draknek Friends official podcast, Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoise.bandcamp.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.